Hi and welcome. This is Marla, and today we're celebrating Debbie J's 4,000 subscriber milestone. Debbie's been working so hard on this hop. She wanted to just give back to the community that's given so much to her. She's worked so hard to reach this 4,000 subscriber milestone. And first and foremost, I just wanted to congratulate her. It's a big accomplishment, a big deal, and she has something special in store for you. She does have live videos that are going on today, as well as pre-recorded videos such as my own. In fact, the next person in the hop is my friend Joy Wilson from Joy Wilson Inc. Her video will be up and live at 3:30, and I will have that linked in the description box below. In order to qualify for the many prizes that are available, again in the description box below, all you need to do is leave a comment as you hop along and enjoy all of the inspiration from this hop, and also head over to Google. I will have that link in the description box as well to complete your entry. My video today is going to include products from my favorite company, which is the Greetery. The theme for this hop is thank you, so it is going to be a thank you card. Here's a quick look at the card that we'll be creating, and then we'll jump right in. As you can see, this is a slimline card with multiple layers. This is the layering leaf stamp and die set from the Greetery. It does come with that key, which I will get to in just a moment. The die is sold separately. The die does help you add a little bit of dimension to these leaves, which is one of the charming parts of the product. I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine using some white cardstock, and we are going to start by doing some heat embossing. Typically, the way that you would use this stamp and die set would be to stamp the solid images, so there are solid leaves in the stamp set, but I am going to be doing something a little bit different, and I am going to start with the details. The leaves on the right hand side are going to layer on top of the branch. So I'm starting with the detail of the branch on the detail of the twig on the branch, and then I've also added the detail onto the leaves that were cut individually. I'm going to stamp using Versamark ink, and then I will add some Brutus Monroe gilded embossing powder over the top, heat emboss that, and I'll do the same with the individual leaves. I'm finished with the individual leaves, but I do need to add the details to my branch. So there are two other layering stamps that will go on that branch. The first one is going to add the detail to the leaves on the right side, and then we will have the detail on the leaves to the left side. I'm going to stamp and heat emboss the exact same way. When I die cut my images, I did keep the negative space, so you see that I do have that piece of white cardstock that I'm inserting all of my leaves and my branch back into, and this helps for easy alignment. Here's one way to align your stamps, is to put it inside the die cut first and then to add your branch, and then you can use that VersaFine ink and the embossing powder over the top of that. I will add the leaves to the individual slots as well, because you're going to see in a moment that the key that is available with this stamp set is going to have each of those leaves lettered, and then those letters will correlate with a place on that branch for the leaves to go on top of. Now you could add foam tape underneath each of the leaves to keep the dimension. Once I finished, I simply bent mine back. So here's where I'm adding that mica spray. I'm going to be a little bit more heavy-handed and add one extra color to the branch, because I want the branch and the leaves to be a little bit different in color. So I started with Crooked Broomstick, which I believe was part of the Halloween release from Tim Holtz. This is a mica stain that is limited edition. And then I spritzed it with water. I added a little bit of water to the individual leaves, but I did not add any of that crooked broomstick to that. These are mica stains, so there is a ball inside. You do want to shake that very vigorously to make sure that that mica powder that is at the bottom of the bottle does get distributed evenly in the spray. So the second color that I added to both the leaves and to the branch was Winter Frost, which is a blue color. And finally, I'm going to add Fresh Balsam. I'll spray the Fresh Balsam onto my branch, but I'm going to use the nozzle just to add a little bit of it to each of the individual leaves. In between each of the colors, I did use my Ranger heat tool to dry everything, and that just makes sure that each color is going to layer on top of each other, as opposed to if I were to leave that ink wet, it would start to meld together. We're going to start putting this together. As I mentioned, those leaves on the right do have a coordinating key. You can see it at the bottom right hand. At the bottom right is going to be the placement of the leaves. On the left shows you the key for the leaves that I did leave inlaid in the negative space. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue to the bottom of each leaf. I will let this dry for about 15 minutes. Once that has dried, because the top portion of the leaf has not been glued down to the branch, I am going to be able to just slightly bend those back. And at the end, you're going to see the close-up of the card, and you'll be able to see the dimension that that gives. Again, you could add a small piece of foam tape underneath, but I think that just bending it backward works sufficiently. But I love the dimension that having those additional leaves really adds to this leaf cluster. I did do a second branch the exact same way. So I heat embossed it, I added the mica stain, and then I went ahead, or I added the heat embossing, I added the mica stain, and then I added my layered leaf. So I have two of those branches for my card. Moving on to my background, I am using another stamp set from the Greetery. It's called Sketched Wildflower Bouquet, and we're going to do some quick watercoloring. I am going to start with a piece of watercolor cardstock. This is Canson XL watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to stamp using Distress Oxide inks, and I'm going to start with ground espresso. I'll add that to my flowers with a sponge dauber. I'll add a little bit of the pine branch, and then I'll finish off with some evergreen bough. I'm going to spritz the stamp with water, and then I'm going to stamp it down. Now there's two ways that I'm stamping this today. The first one you're going to notice is going to be a lot more concentrated because it will have the first layer of the ink. But I'm going to do a stamp off. I'll turn that cardstock around, and I'm going to do a stamp off, and I'm going to use what ink there is left on that stamp to stamp again. I'll spritz it with a little bit more water to get that ink moving, but you're going to see that it's going to be much lighter. Now this is on purpose. I intentionally did this. If you do not want variations in your color and you want more pronounced stamping, then you certainly can ink that stamp again. I'm going to use a lot of water on my brush just to get that ink moving, because Distress Oxide ink does have a quality that allows it to move with water. It is a dye ink. I am going to go ahead and use that water, use that ink, and I'm going to spread it out to get a nice light espresso color in my flowers. You can see that I'm not being very careful to stay in the lines. Where I need more color, I will just add a little bit of it to my glass mat, and then I'll use my brush to add it. So where I had that lighter stamping, of course, there's not as much ink to move, so I am going to use that ink just to add a little bit more definition to those branches. And I'll do the same thing right here, and then we're going to move on to another area. I'm going to speed this up quite a bit. I just wanted to show you how I did the watercoloring, and then I'm going to repeat the procedure. So I am going to move my stamp into a new position. This time most of the leaves are going to show and not so much of the flowers. I'll use those same ink colors. I'll start with my ground espresso, add that to my stamp. I'll add the evergreen bough, and then I'll finish up with my I think it's pine branch is what it's called. Pine something, pine feathers maybe. Then I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to spritz it with water again, and then I'm going to stamp a second time, and that's going to give me that more subtle stamping. Here I'm going to add it a third time. This will be the final stamping. This time I need to add a little bit more ink to my image, so I'll do the same inking again, and then I'll go back and I'll watercolor all 3 sections. This is a quick way to get a beautiful card. You certainly could add some more stamping. If you had a text stamp, it would be really pretty to fill in some of the areas lightly with some different colored inks. You could splatter this with some watercolor, like some gold watercolor. There are many ways that you could use this background on its own, and it would be absolutely beautiful. But for my card today, this is actually going to be the bottom layer of my card. So I did cut the cardstock to 3 3/4 by 8 3/4 inches, and that will be the finished size of my card today. I have some gold foil cardstock and the crimp slimline die. Again, this is from the Greetery. This is the smallest of the 2 dies that are in that set, and I've just went ahead and cut a layer using that die. I've cut a piece of minty green cardstock to approximately 3 1/4 inches by 8 1/4 inches, and I'm inking up a red rubber stamp, again from the Greetery. This one is called Calico Patchwork. I've added some ground espresso, and I'm spritzed it with a little bit of water. I stamped about a third of it, and then I'm going to repeat stamp, making sure not to overlap any of those areas, adding my paper to my cardstock. So you can see that I have kind of a watercolor look, and then there are some spaces where I actually missed stamping. I didn't want to stamp the edge too hard because I didn't want a line to be there. So I just went over the areas that still had ink on it and added it. I dried my panel, and now I'm going to add a little bit of that ground espresso around the edges just to fill in some of those solid green spaces. I did want to mention that Calico Patchwork stamp does come with a stencil set, so if you didn't want to leave the solid colored flowers in the center, you can use the stencil over the top of that, and that would allow you to fill it in with more details. This is another die from the Greetery. It is called the Pussy Willow Botanic Huts die. There are 3 different dies in this set. Each one will cut out both the branch and the pussy willows. I'm going to start with the branch, and I did get this idea off of the Greetery's YouTube channel. Betsy does some demonstrations with some of her new dies, so this some of this color combination kind of came from her. She did use the rusty hinge to start with because pussy willow branches are not a solid brown. They have a little bit of pink, they have a little bit of orange. So I started with, as I mentioned, the rusty hinge. I added a little bit of the spun sugar. Now I'm coming in with some frayed burlap. These little brushes are from Amazon. I think I got 4 different 3-packs for like $15. If you're interested, just let me know and I can leave, well, I'll try to remember to link them in the description box below. And if I don't, then just leave me a message and in the comment section and I'll make sure to go back and do that. I'm adding ground espresso, what was left on the brush, to the edges of the pussy willows. I also added it to the branch just to tie in all of the colors and even everything out. All you need to do to put these together is to go ahead and align the branch over the top of the pussy willows. Super easy. There are some separate pieces like the layered leaf die that you could add over the top to give it a little bit more dimension, but I didn't use them on my branches today. I'm going to add a little bit more depth using that ground espresso at the base of each of the pussy willows. And now we're going to move on to another Greetery die. This one is called Wood Slices. The one on the right is the background for the one that I'm inking with the antique linen on the left. So this is going to give a little bit of dimension. The one on the right, I did start with Vintage Photo. And then I am going to add a little bit of ground espresso at the end just to give it a little bit more depth. Over the top of this antique linen, I'm adding that frayed burlap just to give, again, a little bit more dimension. There is a nice wood grain that embosses into the top layer, and then there's a little bit of wood grain, as you can see probably pretty well at the very top right here of the bottom portion of the slice. I'm going to leave those two pieces apart. I'm not going to glue them together. There's a look at what it will look like once it's put together, but I have an idea of how I want to put my card together, and I didn't want to glue those pieces down just yet. These little flowers come from, again, the Greetery. This one is called Curio Spring Findings. There is a die that has eggs and a nest and pussy willows and some other items that fit very nice into a grid pattern design. But I love these little flowers, and I thought that they would look really nice as an addition to my branches and my pussy willows. So I inked them up with spun sugar, added a little bit of frayed burlap. To the center of those small pieces, I did color those with evergreen bough, spritzed both of them with water, do a little bit of dabbing so that it lightens the color just a little bit to give it that softness. So if you add water to Distress Oxide or Distress Ink and you add a microfiber cloth or a paper towel over the top, it will soak up a little bit of the color and it will lighten it for you. So if you ever get anything too dark, just use a little bit of water. Now I'm using a stamp set called Opposites Attract. I've already cut out the negative piece, which is a separate die, and I used the blue and the fresh balsam on that die to get the same color as my leaves. And now I'm going to stamp it using the ground espresso, and that will be the word thank you. There are some sub-sentiments that also come in this set, and I went ahead and stamped that off camera, and then I die cut it with the coordinating die. Again, the dies are sold separately. So now we're going to start putting our card together. I do have an 8 3/4 by 3 3/4 side folding panel, and I'm adding my bottom layer, which was the watercolor piece that we started with. I'm going to add some double-sided adhesive to the back of my crimped slimline die from the gold foil cardstock, and I'm going to add that to the top of my mint brown paper. So those two layers are going to go together, and then I'm going to add both of those to the top of my watercolor panel. So lots of layers on this card, which is why I'm so glad that Debbie gave me 20 minutes to put this video together, because typically I do much shorter videos, and having the opportunity to really explain what I'm doing and go at a decent pace was such a blessing. So I'm thankful if you've stuck around this long to watch the entire video. I'm going to center this onto my card panel, and now is where I'm going to start building my wood slice. So I'm adding that double-sided adhesive to the back of my wood slice. This is the bottom layer. Once I remove the release paper, I am going to center it onto that panel. And here's the idea I had. I'm going to add the branch with the leaves, the layered leaves, and there's like a little die cut area in the center of those leaves where I just added that pussy willow branch so that they could layer together. And I'm adding one of each at the top and one of each towards the bottom, and I'm going to use that double-sided tape to adhere it down. So this is going to hold those branches in place, but again, I'm going to have a little bit of bulk in that area, and in order to avoid having a lumpy card, I'm going to add some foam tape to that bottom layer of the wood slice. So I have this 1/4 inch foam tape from scrapbook.com. I'll add one piece to the left side, and then I'm going to add a second to the right, and we're going to sandwich this together, giving a little bit more dimension. Once I get the top of this wood slice on, I'm going to add my sentiment. Typically when I use sentiments like these, I like to layer them up for more of a chipboard feel, but because I added that foam tape to the back of the wood slice, I decided just to go with a single layer. If you want, you certainly could die cut 2 more or 3 more thank yous, and you could add just glue them together, and it would give you a nice sturdy sentiment. But I'm going to glue these directly to the wood slice without adding any additional layers. I'm going to center the U as best as I can, and then I'll center the sub-sentiment. I have the 2 flowers that I still need to add. Now for my card, I decided to add a little bit of foam tape to the back of those little flowers, and I'm going to add them to the left upper left of that wood slice and to the bottom right, upper right, bottom left, sorry, of that wood slice. You certainly could add them to the layered leaves somewhere if you wanted to just keep the diagonal composition going, but I thought that it looked really nice on those to fill in those other sides of the wood slice. And once I do that, that will complete my card for today. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't subscribed to my channel and you enjoyed my video, I would absolutely love for you to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Congratulations, Debbie, and until next time, have a fabulous day.